Early in my teaching career, I worked in an international school in the United Arab Emirates. The children came from all over the world: Saudi Arabia, the Philippines, Somalia, Egypt, Bangladesh, India. They came from many cultures and spoke many languages, but our curriculum was American and delivered in English. The curriculum meant I had to teach these children about the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, the state of Florida, and snowfall in the Rockies. It was all fascinating to me, but sadly, not to the children. Oh, they'd turn up, they'd sit and listen, or look as if they were listening, and then the bell would ring and they'd go home. I just knew that I wasn't getting through. I wasn't helping them. They weren't learning anything useful. They didn't see the point. It was all alien to them, outside their experience. What's more, the language of the curriculum was too complicated. So I asked myself, what needs to happen here? What skills do these eager minds need to learn? And what's going to engage them? I tried a simple trick. I asked them. I found out what they cared about, what they wanted to learn about, what set their imaginations alight. They told me they wanted to learn about dinosaurs. They cared about the ducks in the nearby pond. They shared what they wanted to be when they grew up. It was all a long, long way from the subjects I was supposed to be teaching. Right then and there, I tore up that curriculum and I let the children guide their own learning. Of course, I was still their teacher and I couldn't leave them entirely to their own devices. But I concentrated on teaching them to read and write and add up through the topics that they cared about. We focused on the things that they needed help with. In an international school, the children needed to access the curriculum delivery in English, again, through the topics that they cared about. This new way of learning helped them to develop the skills they needed. The transformation in my pupils surprised and delighted me. One 7-year-old boy told me he couldn't describe snow because he'd never experienced it before when we'd been talking about the Rockies. A few weeks later, I shared my experience of growing up in Scotland, making snowmen in the garden, feeling my fingers turn numb and seeing my breath. He told me he'd gone home and stuck his hands and head in the freezer so he could imagine being in snow. Then and there, he decided he wanted to travel so he could experience real snow. Immediately, engagement increased. The kids couldn't wait to come to school. Parents noticed the difference. They couldn't stop talking about what they'd done in school that day. The children were curious to learn about the wider world, all things they hadn't done before. Eventually, the head teacher decided that all teachers in the school would do the same. We set the curriculum to develop the skills the children needed. We used topics the children cared about. It was a bespoke curriculum for children with a unique set of needs in an international environment. Now, you might be thinking this approach could never work in a mainstream school. Could it? Well, I believe it could. More importantly, I believe it must. I've heard it said that the Chinese word for crisis also has a sense of opportunity. Well, that's certainly true for the COVID crisis. Until the pandemic struck in 2020, we'd been teaching our children in the same way for almost 100 years. If you went into a school anywhere in the world, it would be recognisable to you. You'd see a teacher at the front of the class imparting facts from a structured curriculum. The students trying to cram it in their brain, remember it, and then regurgitate it in a set of exams. The pandemic disrupted education around the world. It completely changed the way schools were teaching their children. That knowledge transfer changed. Millions of children were educated at home. Millions were left to find things out for themselves online. Millions had their exams cancelled. In many respects, this rapid change was far from ideal. It exposed the divide between rich and poor, those who had access to computers and those who didn't. Some children had quiet rooms at home where they could learn without distraction. Others had smaller homes with less personal space. Some parents worked closely with their children while others couldn't. But the pandemic highlighted what many people doubted, that our education system was capable of rapid change. I believe it's brought an opportunity for us to rethink how we teach our children. It's an opportunity for rebirth. As we consider education post-pandemic, this is a rare chance for us to question the orthodoxy and ask, what is education for, and what needs to change? On that first question, what is education for, I kept coming back to the same answer. The purpose of education is to prepare children to take their place in the adult world, to contribute to and benefit from society and the world of work, where employers want people with transferable skills rather than just knowledge-based qualifications. That's as it's always been. The second question is trickier. What needs to change? The two approaches in education have always had their passionate supporters, the traditionalists versus the progressives. The traditional approach focuses on direct instruction with a specific outcome, usually an assessment. The teacher is seen as the gatekeeper of knowledge. The progressive approach ranges wider. Learning is child-centred, with the teacher seen as the facilitator. Now, I'm not here to argue for one or the other, traditional or progressive. Like most things, it's about balance. There's a place for both. What I am saying is that what we teach and how we teach are out of date, and just how out of date has been thrown into stark relief by a worldwide health crisis. It's time for a new way of learning. Schools must prepare children with transferable skills to prepare them for adulthood and the workplace. Traditional ways of teaching impose a historical, analogue system on young digital minds. Making them learn a narrow, predetermined set of facts used to be enough, but not anymore. Today's children don't need to know countless facts by heart when all the information in the world is just a Google away. You only have to think of the changes that you've seen since you left school to know the truth of this. Think of all the technology that you use today that didn't exist when you were at school. Think of how quickly things are changing in our world. Most of the knowledge we gain today will be outdated in 10 years or 5 years, probably even sooner. Schools must keep pace with change. Better still, stay ahead of change. Schools must prepare children for jobs and technology that don't yet exist. If they don't, they become less and less relevant, less and less fit for that purpose of preparing children for the adult world. Tomorrow's successful adults will be responsible for their own lifelong learning. This is the single most important skill that education must equip them with. I believe it calls for 3 separate but interlinked capabilities. 3 things to be successful in tomorrow's world: self-motivation, imagination, and communication. Self-motivation to continue to educate themselves in the subjects they care about. imagination to develop their own thinking based on the facts, and communication to pass their ideas to others. So tomorrow's successful adults will need to be constantly self-motivated. They'll need new ideas and they'll need to be able to communicate them effectively at an international level. The digital age has opened access to the world. Company offices no longer need to be in the same geographical location anymore. Businesses are recruiting internationally, which increases the competition for jobs. So these apparently soft skills deserve at least as much emphasis in the curriculum as the traditional syllabus. Not taught as single subjects, so no timetabled lessons in imagination or weekly sessions on self-motivation. They must overlay the whole curriculum and be part of all learning. So what would this look like? Well, schools would design and build their own curriculum based on a framework of skills. The curriculum must be relevant to the needs of the children. School leaders and teachers would make decisions about the content and delivery of the curriculum. Leaders would decide what do children want to learn, what do children need to learn, and how will children learn what they want and need. Brave school leaders embrace change and set the culture of their schools so that children have the best chance of success. Brave school leaders look beyond the current model of a curriculum-based approach and consider new ways that children can learn the essential skills to navigate the future. And it's doable within the current system. If schools implement these reforms, the benefits will flow, just as they did for those children I was talking about earlier. Right from their earliest days, children will start to develop the practical skills they need to prepare for the opportunities, responsibilities, and experiences of later life. Teachers and school leaders will be in a better position to challenge new theories and ideas, to be truly independent thinkers rather than passive practitioners limited to delivering a syllabus that's been handed down to them. Businesses will have a ready supply of workers with the relevant skills. We all have our own ideas about education, but whatever our views, I think we agree on its importance to the individual, to society, to the wider world, and to a sustainable future. The global pandemic has reminded us starkly that the future is uncertain. To navigate this uncertainty, children will need self-motivation, imagination, and communication skills. The global pandemic has shown that learning doesn't have to take place in the classroom. Children can develop their imaginations in new and different environments. And the global pandemic gives us that rare chance now to make those changes to ensure that education is fit for that future.